Share Beirut presents Quinn Norton, Wired.
Hi, I'm Quinn Norton. I don't have my slides up yet. Yes. I write for Wired mostly. For the last couple years, I've been studying network collectives, online and off. I covered, for several months, I covered Anonymous and Occupy. Sorry, there's an announcement.
I'm sorry, you guys, to interrupt, but the Q&A of Wa'el Abbas is starting now, just to let you guys know.
Okay, where were we? So I'm Quinn Norton, I'm a writer. I study groups that organize themselves online, like Anonymous, Occupy. I did months of coverage for Wired in the case of Occupy moving from camp to camp, living with people and watching them protest and eventually become evicted from their space. I rode shotgun on Anonymous operations quite a few times. I got to know people on social media, IRC, sometimes protesting in the streets in real life. More recently, I've been studying kind of telecomics and how it works. And long before all of this, I was part, not just studying, but part of the hackerspace movement out of San Francisco. And what I came to call all these things was a stochastic revolutionary network collective. And let me define exactly what I mean by that. It's an aggregate collective of people who converge on a common aesthetic and come to share common values. Now, they don't have leaders in the traditional sense, but they can have abstract authorities. Their actions tend to emerge. They represent a distinct way of being in the world. They are, in short, a collective of individuals. Not in the way that all collectives are collectives of individuals, but in the sense that they are a collective that does not coercively require you to sacrifice your individuality to be part of it. Everyone brings their whole package into the collectives that they join, and anyone can leave and come as they please. We've seen echoes of this in history, but I don't think it was possible before the net. The net makes this kind of socialization work, perhaps better than traditional social organizations do. We can communicate so quickly and so frictionlessly on this network that how we think becomes different. This is a place where our inner world is social, and that's never been true before in the history of humanity. And in some cases, our inner world is more social than our outer world. This is a place where we make flash mobs, where we can pass ideas around and iterate on them in what would have been unthinkable speeds. We can have collective dreams about events. And this is one of my favorite examples of a collective dream. You'll recognize this as the pepper spray cop. And this is one of the fastest moving memes that I ever saw in my life. Pepper spray cop suddenly started turning up everywhere. Really everywhere. Guernica is one of my favorites for him. And what we watched happening here is a collective dream that the internet had about police brutality. I think one of the things that was so shocking about this to the world, not just America, is because America didn't think this could happen there, but the world didn't really think this could happen to America either. They didn't know we would do this to ourselves. And if America won't even be nice to America, how the hell is it going to be nice to anyone else? So what we have on the network is this version of humanity that works by different rules, more like a flock of birds or a school of fish, or my favorite metaphor for Anonymous in particular, the slime mold. It's a networked organisms in some way. It acts like a singular thing, but at the same time, it is still very organic. And like any organic thing, it can bleed. And when this thing is encountering traditional systems, it tends to bleed badly. I think one of the reasons why nations are beginning to look more like this at the moment is that these collectives are completely weird to traditional institutions. They're scary, and traditional institutions shoot things they don't understand. But a little unicorn chaser for all that heavy shit. When you look at things like the copyright debate, the billions that have gone into fighting the network collectives, when you look at Occupy and the thousands that have been arrested, and some of whom actually face quite dire consequences for protesting, and after nearly 2 years, excuse me. When you look at the Arab Spring and you see what might be tens of thousands of deaths kicked off by the properties of these collectives, it doesn't point towards a particularly peaceful future for what the internet does to human identity. But let's actually go ahead and talk about the shape of this thing. This is a looking glass world. This is a scene from Alice Through the Looking Glass. In particular, this is one of my favorite scenes for describing working with Anonymous. This is Alice trying to reach the top of the hill in the Garden of Living Flowers. And she's surrounded by beautiful flowers that are constantly shouting sarcastic insults to her, and no matter how hard she tries to get to the top of the hill, she always ends up navigating back to the bottom. That is exactly what working with Anonymous is like. So, eventually what you have to do is hold your breath and go the wrong direction. Now, what exactly is so freaking weird about this? They invert the selection process. So, when you're dealing with stochastic network collectives, the big announcement of something, the big manifesto, that is the way in which you tell everyone that you want to talk about something. At that point, everyone goes behind doors and actually has the discussion about whether or not it's going to happen. This is totally confusing for press, for instance. This is why I love using Operation Facebook, because periodically the press come back to me and say, is Anonymous going to take down Facebook? And I'm like, okay, it's not that simple. I mean, the short answer is no. The longer answer is that if you want to know if an anon-op is going to happen, you don't look at the crazy video you found on YouTube. You have to go sit around in IRC channels and take the temperature of the room and figure out how people are talking about it. And they're like, lady, I'm on a deadline. What are you talking about? But that's actually how the social structure works, and we don't have a way of processing that. Going back to our slime mold, these are structures that actually draw some level of stability from their conflict. There's always some part of Anonymous that will denounce any operation as not really anonymous, which is always handy. But in this kind of conflict, there's a resiliency. I used to think it was a total structural resiliency. I've narrowed that thought now to the fact that this is the thing, this inner conflict, this constant schisming and social war that goes on, is the thing that makes it incredibly hard to co-opt these structures. Unlike, say, the way the Tea Party in America was co-opted by the Republican Party, anyone trying to co-opt Occupy, which is totally factionalist, like fractally factionalist at every level you look at it, generally, if they make a really good effort, they end up with a working group. That's what trying to co-opt these structures gets you. Your very own meeting you can have on Tuesday nights. Then there's the one I always get about having no leaders, and even people inside collectives are often like, yeah, but really who are the leaders? Because this is our frame of reference. Hierarchies are how we process the world. When you walk into a room, even this room, the first question you ask is, who's important? These networks invert that idea. And I've thought a lot about why they're so allergic to leadership. One of the obvious ones is that leadership has been so amazingly abusive in human history, but I don't think that's it. I still think that the thing about a collective is that it thinks with all of its people at once, and a leader represents a point where all of that thought has to stop, wait for one guy, and then start again. So, when you look at things like a protest that would take months to plan, can happen in hours online. A collective can brainstorm a set of tactics in Op BART, which was the BART-related protest that Anonymous supported in the Bay Area after the cell phone cut. The AnonOps channel started in on a whole field of tactics to counter this, and then instead of choosing one, they did them all, even the really bad ideas. They all got done. That's how a collective operates. They don't sit and choose the best course of action. They just do all the things. But perhaps the most important thing that these networks do is that they invert our normal systems of agency and social capital. So the way life normally works is that you build up social capital and you use that to get agency in the world. You build your resume, you go to school, You do your time, you pay your dues, and then you'll be given a little bit of power to do something that matters in the world. That's your hope. If you've got enough money and enough connections and you've built all these different ways of getting social capital, someone will give you the power to affect the world in some small way. When you're in these networks, your social capital comes from your agency. You do shit. If you do shit and it works, people like you more. And when people first enter these networks, they sit there going, will somebody tell me what to do? And everybody's sitting there going, no one's going to tell you what to do. No one's going to give you permission. And you see this moment of panic. At the Occupy, sometimes in people's eyes, online, there's kind of a version of seeing it in their eyes, where they're not sure how to proceed. And then there's a moment when they learn to give themselves permission to do things. And then things start to happen. I watched this a lot in person at Noisebridge when people be like, I want to do this at the hackerspace. And other people would be like, I don't know what you're telling me that. Tell me when you've done it. Now, the thing that about agency is the relationship of agency is at the heart of what makes a political action in a collective attractive to people. You can dig through 1,000 stories, and I swear to God I have at this point, on why people join things like Occupy and Anonymous. And all of them and all the myriad forms come down to one concept. They join for empowerment. They join because they don't feel they have another way to make their mark upon the world. They don't matter the way they want to matter. Even if they matter in some way that is important, that is held in esteem, they have somehow felt that they are powerless in their lives. And by joining this thing, they can take action and make a mark on the world. So why, at some level, the reason that they have the blood and they put their blood and treasure into this is because the social capital system hasn't delivered for them. The institutions have started to fail them. And that's what's going to attract people to these collectives, is the failure of traditional social institutions, the ones who've paid their dues and still can't get anywhere. But a little on the nature of agency. We often spend a lot of time getting social capital in our lives, but what we really want is agency. Agency is that thing that makes life worth living. One of the most touching, this is Occupy Boston, and one of the most touching things that I saw in my coverage was actually outside of the kitchen tent at Occupy Boston. There was a junkie who was part of the Occupy, and the junkie, who had recently been shooting up heroin, decided to go do the dishes. He was doing them badly, but he was doing them. No one was going to stop him. No one was going to tell him off. Now, that probably seems like a really small thing, and who cares? But when you battle a disease as terrible as addiction, when you are in American society and much of the world reduced to the status of non-person by your addiction, being able to give something back to a community can save your life. In fact, the community of recovery would suggest, the experiences there would suggest that the only thing that saves your life is the agency to serve other people. Service is what makes us human. And increasingly, most of the world is locked out of that service to each other. The people in these groups come together to be part of something larger than themselves. When they do that and they reach out across the world, when they feel like they're part of the world, it's intoxicating. When you've been part of some small part of the Tunisian revolution from your bedroom in Ohio, when you've talked to people on the ground in Bahrain, when you've pitched tents with people in Melbourne, when you've watched people like yourself and Guy Fawkes masks protesting web censorship in New Delhi, you learn the world. And you feel the world, and you can't unlearn that. I remember there's a video of, I think, German Tunisians thanking Anonymous. And what is most fascinating about that video is watching what it did to the Anons who watched it. Whether or not they call it anonymous, those people are never going to quit. They felt something they had never been able to feel before. This is mostly here because I like it, but the thing is about the nature of meaning with these groups is we're well past the point of mere cynicism when it comes to the things that once gave humanity meaning. We have no nations, we have no masters we really believe in. We now know too much about them. One of the Tunisian activists I interviewed called this the post-punk era. No gods, no masters. Even our gods don't have earthly representation the way that they once did. Authority figures come pre-fallen these days. We just wait for them to fail us. Even the dreams of enemies have failed to unify us. We just know too much about other people's lives. Our country spent a lot of time telling us another set of people is the enemy, but we kind of know how they work and how they get up in the morning and that their social institutions have failed them too. So at some level, we all kind of know it's bullshit. We don't have anything that binds us together the way it once did. But humans come with a need for meaning. We need to know that our pain and our hopes matter in the world, and people find these in these communities. It's elusive and it fails probably most of the time. But there's moments. Protests and petitions, blackouts from SOPA, people coming together whose only common culture is the internet. People standing side by side against police lines in Oakland and Boston and Cairo. People working together to build tools across the world. With so little left to believe in, it may be that the only thing we have to believe in is each other. One of my favorite things about all of this is I call them the asshat revolutions. We're not really very good at all of this. There's nothing elite about what we're doing right now. We're all kind of bumbling, incompetent fools on the internet. And of course, the mass majority of the things our networks do fail epically. But every once in a while, they don't. Every once in a while, they do something amazing. This is a world where America's social rejects, closed ports, and Tunisia's football hooligans helped throw out a dictator. And a bunch of Polish kids came together to protest an internet law they didn't like. And they lit a fire across Europe that eventually culminated in 300,000 people in 200 cities in Europe that eventually did just about everything they could to take down a bad internet law that would have censored them. That is awesome. But it's also a world without credit, as we think of it. I went to Poland and other parts of Europe to try and discover who killed ACTA, and the answer is no one knows. No one knows exactly how this happened. It just happened. It just emerged from the fabric of the societies that took part in it. Now, there were plenty of people that put together Facebook groups to protest in the streets of Krakow, but none of them had done anything like that before. None of them knew the anti-ACTA people that have been working on these issues for years. The anti-ACTA people, myself one of them, jumped into it after the protests had started. We didn't do it. We don't get credit. This is increasingly a world without normal credit. And a world without normal predictability. The social institutions that we have, they're all about predictability. They're all about creating this safe zone outside of the state of nature where we can control who does what of consequence. But when you look at this story, the combination of a pissed off fruit vendor, paint thinner, and Facebook was not supposed to take down the government of Tunisia. We had things in place to stop that sort of thing from happening. But this network that we've created, it returns us to a state of nature. Now, this is my daughter, and I learned a very important thing about the internet from her, because the way she saw the internet was that thing that was full of all the stuff everyone knows but hasn't thought of yet. This is our shared existence, our shared memory. And what I learned from the way that she looked at her presence on the internet was that these aren't the nodes on the internet. We are. We use these things, but we are the receptacles of knowledge, and we are the things that interrelate and form a network together. And that, as well, is awesome. However, if you're part of a traditional institution, this thing and what it does to social organization, it looks like the Borg. It looks like it takes everything it touches and turns it into this unstoppable man-machine horrific thing. It's the Borg, it's Terminator, it's the zombie apocalypse, and we already have their children. They're already part of the zombies on the internet. And that's one of the reasons why they're going to fight so hard. It's one of the reasons why traditional institutions are fighting for their existential lives, whether it's with billions of dollars and lawyers or guns, because this is what the internet looks like to them. So, but as scary as this is to traditional institutions, it's just a stumbling mess the majority of the time. The outstanding question of all of this is, does any of it actually matter? And the answer is, I don't know. It's so hard to make anything in this world matter. It's hard to imagine anything other than apocalypse that could matter on the scale of 1 billion people, and we have 7 of those. No wonder our institutions have utterly failed us. Think about that scale. Every second that passes, 221 years of human experience go by. In the time that you are sitting here listening to me talk, the sum of humans will have lived 266,000 years on our tiny, tiny blue planet, right? It's not the blue circle, it's inside the blue circle. Billions of those people are on the net, making things, consuming things, sharing. They're falling in love and going to war and hunting for porn and filling out tax forms and collecting lolcats. Everything they do is creating this place. It persists and it grows. It's this extra world that we've laid on top of our world. We are, at this moment, very bad at living in our new world. We don't know what we're doing. The network is a state of nature that we kind of made, but which escaped our grasp. The world is as illegible as it was when it was new, and mankind is once again struggling at the edge of a frontier. We have to make new institutions, new ways of being together, new ways of sharing our attention. We don't even have words to describe the world we inhabit. We need new literacies, we need new metaphors, we need new talismans against new evil eyes. This mess we're in, this is the start of a new age. Thank you.